Is there any small tidbit that you've learned from Naval that stuck out to you?
There's a lot. There's a ton.
I think that is interesting too, how there can be so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to pick a few good ones, but
yeah, I think one thing is, and we can kind of break these down, but one thing is play long-term games with long-term minded people.
yes,
That's something that I really enjoy. He says don't play status games. Get rich on purpose is another one, and we can go into any of these that resonate with you. There's the idea of leverage that he talks about a lot, and it goes back to Archimedes' principle, where you give me a lever long enough and then I'll move the world.
Yep.
That's a really powerful concept. He talks about compound interest. That's another really powerful concept. That
everything comes from compound interest.
He talks about how in the financial space, it's really the compound interest applied to finance is just scratching the surface. It applies to everything, and it's a fundamental.
Right.
But I think probably one of the most powerful concepts that I've taken from him is productize yourself. And when I go back and I read a lot of what he's put in that book, I realize how much of that is embodied in the company that we're making. Hey,
back at it.
It's good, y'all.
It's another Founders Drive.
Yeah, man, back on this Founders Drive. man. Good week.
Fantastic week. The end of the month, start of a new month.
Yeah, man. We got a lot in the oven regarding constants and some of the updates that we're going to be pushing out here.
Absolutely.
Working on the mobile app.
Yeah.
So that should be coming around the corner. We also have the updates to the guest checkout flows for people that are wanting to take advantage of the digital products on Constance and create their own digital products. So
yeah, some
things to look for around the corner. If you're curious about that, just reach out.
Yeah.
So why don't we get into the thick of things?
Yeah, I would love to get into the thick of things. I mean, those platform updates are always like necessary.
Yeah.
Just to kind of,
you got to know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you know, that's
keep you up to date.
Yeah. And that's also part of our founders journey is like, and why we do a lot of this is
exactly
the discussions about founders on this drive and what we do, how we reflect, all feeds into ultimately the products that we're making and the ideas that we're finding and how we're developing them and turning that into something valuable.
Yeah, I think this week, what's interesting is this week normally we talk about things that, you want to do, you want to kind of mimic, you want to kind of, learn from. But this week I found myself looking at a founder who I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't do some of those things.
Okay. Cool.
I watched that, I don't know, I think it's new. It's in 2025. There's a Netflix show about the cult of American Apparel.
Ooh, the cult of American Apparel.
Yes, the clothing brand that was booming in the early 2000s and has since receded to what they are today. And it was an entire documentary about the founder of American Apparel. I think his name was Dov Charney.
Dov Charney, okay.
And just kind of the not mannerisms, but like his ways of leading were extremely unique. I think he picked up a lot of his leadership tactics from the 48 Laws of Power.
Okay.
By Robert Greene.
Okay, I know that they have a relationship that definitely was documented.
Okay.
Like, walk me through this documentary. Is it like a 1 hour documentary? Is it like a multiple part?
I believe it was a one section of just like an hour and a half of talking through what it was like to work in American Apparel while they were booming, some of the early employees and what the work-life balance, the culture was like working there, and then some of the stories that came out of that. Obviously, for anyone that knows about the journey there, I think Dove had a couple of harassment charges filed against him by employees at the company.
Is that ultimately what led to his ousting?
Yeah, that's what ultimately led the board to kind of get rid of him.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that every single employee, every single time they got any kind of pay raise or any kind of pay adjustment, they had to sign another non-disclosure where they wouldn't talk bad about the company, they wouldn't disparage the founder. And it was every single time that compensation came around, they'd have to sign a brand new NDA.
Okay.
And so that was one of the reasons why the harassment, I guess, allegations never really went either. They were kind of silenced, is because everybody at the company had these NDAs where they were so heavy on confidentiality that it was a lock solid case for him to be like, all right, like you're obviously breaking your contract, and so you can't bring this to court.
NDAs like that are tricky because they make sense from the perspective that if I'm paying you, if you're part of this company, we don't want you talking bad about the company. But there's like an abuse of power that can happen too.
I mean, to me, even that though, like if I'm paying you, you can talk bad about the company, that's fine. To me, it's like, even if I'm paying you, because if I'm paying you, hopefully we're doing good work together.
But the reason why I say that is you look at a company like Apple. Yeah. You're not talking bad about Apple. And I think the NDAs allow you to keep things secret, keep things, especially if you're building something or you have a strategy in place. There's so much room for, but I guess what I was getting at is the thing that can go wrong is when the company takes advantage of that and they use it to silence employees for reasons that aren't related to business. Yeah, if it's IP, if it's stuff that's confidential for the reason the business is successful, sure. But even if you're employed at Apple, you should be able to talk smack about the public stuff. You probably shouldn't, but you should be allowed to. It's like, okay, well, do you think that somebody should get fired if they sign an NDA about something very, like, not to tarnish the name, and then they say something that's like hurting the company? And like, do you think they should just be able to walk in and resume work as is? Yeah, I think like you should be able to say what you want. Now, of course, everything you say has repercussions. And so if Tim Cook is like, well, that's fine, you can say what you want, but you won't work here saying it. That's completely acceptable. But to say that like you can't say anything like that, that's where it gets a little weird to me. Especially in the nature of like the things that are public. You know, if Apple comes out with like liquid glass and I'm a designer at Apple, I'm like, yeah, I wasn't really on board with this. Like it isn't what I wanted to bring to market. It's a bad look on you, 100%. And the company may let you go because you're not acting as a team player and stuff like that. But to go to court and say like, oh, he shouldn't be allowed to say that, I think is like where it crosses the line. Like some type of agreement that is pre-signed that says you explicitly, like a blanket NDA can get weird. Yeah. But also, I don't know, I don't want to divulge too much, but it is an interesting thing because it's like that's one of those circumstances where they're probably keeping people quiet for reasons that aren't related to business. 100%. 100%. And then also doing things that are borderline, but they're imposing this fear with this legal document that says, hey, we don't want you talking. It's like they're limiting free speech as opposed to doing it for business interests. Exactly. And that's where it certainly crosses the line where you're like, yeah, you can't talk about all the harassment that's going to happen here. Like, what? No, you should not be harassing people. Yeah. But there are certain things, like for instance, if you're on a sports team, like you're not going to go out and talk about like your plays or your strategy and and even if you talk about, and there's actually, let me even broaden this a little bit, is you actually don't necessarily need an NDA outside of very, very specific private business dealings. If you curb free speech, then you should just fire the person if you don't want the person. Exactly. There. And so it's like, just be more open about the expectations and 100%, right? And especially if it's public information. Yeah. It's like, all right, like it's public information. Everybody's commenting on this. Whatever. I think a lot of that stuff was like a red flag. And we've seen that too in business meetings where we've had with entrepreneurs where they're like, hey, like I'm in stealth mode. I need you to sign this NDA before we can talk. It's like, well, you probably don't have anything. I'm not, you know what I mean? It. Like you probably have nothing, and you're probably doing that because you heard somebody else say, you need an NDA for that, even though 9 times out of 10 you definitely don't. Yeah. So that was just like one of the red flags. But Dov apparently was running his company very literally
based on the laws of power, the 48 laws of power by Robert Greene, where he would take everything in that book as the literal guideline on how you should run your life. At least that was my interpretation of it.
Okay.
And if you read that book as a very strict interpretation, it's a pathway to a very toxic environment.
Are there any examples of how he implemented the 48 laws of power? The documentary?
Yeah, there's plenty of them, right? Like, I wish I had the book in front of me where I could go through it. They actually had some of the employees read the laws as they were telling the story, and be like, wow, I just told a story exactly about how he just did this. Some of them were like, never outshine the master.
Okay.
That was one that he used pretty heavily, I think, when people were, he made sure that people were beneath him. There's one story in the documentary, I'm not sure which law it applied to, but he was like getting in people's faces and then like hitting himself to the point where he would yell, "I'm hitting myself because I can't hit you."
That just seems weird.
It seems wild.
Is that in the 48?
No. Like I think it was like that scenario where he was like trying to punish himself or something was a reason of, I think the employee did something and he was like trying to control the narrative of what was happening externally, but internally he was freaking out, and that's what apparently one of the employees were saying was that he was literally hitting himself because he said, I can't hit you, which I guess is good. Don't hit your employees. But it's just an interesting take on like when you take those laws of power and have a very strict interpretation, just how toxic I think things can get.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm familiar with Robert Greene's work, and in almost every interview that I've seen, he describes them they're more descriptive than they are prescriptive.
100%.
So the 48 laws of power are circumstances that he's either found himself in where he got the short end of the stick, or he might have implemented himself. But even historically, when you look back, because he derives these laws or his perspectives largely on historical context and his just stories and historical examples, he usually he uses them as descriptive ways of looking at the dynamics of power. And ultimately, people are driven by power.
Yep.
People want to be able to influence situations that they care about in a way that aligns with their perspectives. I don't know anybody on earth that doesn't do that. Even babies do it. Like if a baby wants something, they're gonna cry, and that's how they influence that situation. It becomes trickier when we get older because things become obfuscated by society, human nature, and just everybody's different competing motives and agendas. But being able to be clear and articulate and understand the dynamics of a social interaction are things that people should be good at.
Yeah, I think what you were saying there, being descriptive rather than prescriptive, is the right way to look at that book, or the right way to look at those laws of power, because they are universal. I agree with those laws. I think they all have a very specific meaning that you can see in the real world. But the way that I like to interpret them is, say exactly what you were saying, kind of the same way they teach the unforgivable curses in Harry Potter. You know what I mean? Like, it's stuff that obviously is illegal to do, and you should never cast them, but we're still going to teach you how to do that in like Defense Against the Dark Arts.
Defense Against the Dark Arts is probably like a better
100%
example from the Harry Potter series.
Yeah, like it's in that class where you learn, hey, these are the things that are inherent to the world, but you need to know them to be able to know when not, or know that you shouldn't use them, or know that you can master these things so that you can either identify when they're being used on you, or just to steer clear of them.
I think that there are benefits to them too, in the sense that when I think of the number one rule, where it's never outshine the master, is if you're in a place where you're learning, or you have a mentor or somebody who knows more than you, there are ways where you can also keep yourself humble and learn from the person who knows more than you in a certain circumstance. So that's like on the more optimistic, lighthearted situation. On the other side of it, you might have somebody who, if you do outshine them, then they'll get aggressive, they'll get mad, and they'll start cutting off opportunities to you. And that's important to know, because a lot of people get defensive over their territory or their circle of competence, and if they feel threatened, then they might get weird about things. And so it's just one of those things where don't act like this wasn't a possibility, or don't act surprised if this happens, because it's part of human nature. And it's just something that a lot of people don't really talk about, you know?
And that's, I think, where the gold is in that book, is that if you are naive to any of these laws, that's a great book to read, because it is human nature. You're going to find this in every single relationship that you ever have. And so being just more read up on it, more educated yourself, is going to put you in a better spot.
Yeah, he actually has like he has a few different books that are really descriptive of human nature and dynamics in different contexts. The 48 Laws of Power is the most well-known one. I think it was his first book too.
Okay.
And it came at his frustration of trying to make it as a writer in Hollywood. He kept running into these situations where he felt like he was qualified. By all accounts, he was qualified, but he wasn't able to break through for one reason or another, and he just got frustrated, and he just put it down on paper, and that's where the 48 Laws of Power came from. But he also wrote the Art of Seduction, talking about different seductive archetypes and how people have used the idea of seduction to their own ends and their own means, both in like a political, in various different perspectives, business perspectives, relationship perspectives. There's also the 33 Strategies for War, which is a really cool book. Yep.
Okay.
And he talks about all of these different strategies that people from Napoleon to Sun Tzu have implemented throughout history, and boils them down to almost a play that you can implement yourself, or at least learn from. There's the Laws of Human Nature, Mastery. So they're really good books that, through his own frustrations in life, he birthed into this world. But the 48 Laws of Power is definitely like the apex of one. We should do a super secret where we actually just dive into like one of the books, and
I'm
like,
down for that.
You know, and pull away from that. But going back to this American Apparel CEO, Dov Charney.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in these anecdotes, or if there's any of these stories or anecdotes that you can recall that people might have talked about, maybe not necessarily related to the 48 Laws of Power, but just that stuck out in this documentary.
The one thing that stuck out to me that wasn't necessarily a negative thing that he did was he was always on. He had enough energy, or he is, I think, still like this, or he's just always on. Never taking sleep, never taking a rest, always charging forward, always looking at what should I be doing next, and always active.
Okay.
And then he expected that of everyone that worked for him.
Gotcha.
So he'd be calling people at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., 2 a.m., you know, throughout the night, and be like, hey, why aren't they picking up? I'm up. Why aren't you up?
Yeah.
And I think it led to at least one of the managers of the stores being fired because he would not pick up his phone at 4 a.m. because he's like, I'm sleeping. But, you know, Dov was like, no, like, I'm on. Everyone else should be on. And so that high level of expectation, I don't see it as necessarily a negative, but you have to set that expectation with the people you're leading ahead of time. You can't not say anything and then at 4 a.m. call somebody and expect them to answer. Yeah. Your expectations are not going to align with the outcome. But, you know, if you can form a team around that and you let them know that up front, I think that's a pretty powerful force if everyone's on all the time. I mean, obviously you need some time for breaks, but
if everybody knows what the expectation is.
Exactly. And the expectation is then I'm working 40 hours every single day. You know, I'm going to find the time to not take a break or a lunch or even to sleep.
Yeah. Or like make it work. It's like if you hire somebody under the guise of a 9 to 5 and then you start calling them outside of that, and that's just not clear, then you're gonna
breed a toxic environment.
Yeah. Okay, that's intriguing. That's intriguing. So from what I know about Dov Charney and American Apparel, I don't know that much. I haven't even watched a documentary on them, but I do know that big thing that he was known for with the company was paying fair wages and fair.
Oh, really?
Yeah, paying fair American wages, doing a lot of I think manufacturing in America, and then also
Yes.
paying people a fair, livable wage.
Okay.
And it's confusing to me because I don't know the full story and why he was ousted. It must have been things outside of the business. But it's curious to me. It's
I
curious
don't
to me,
I
'cause it
don't I
seems
don't
like
think
he
the
had some
business
good
did very well.
intentions. And so that's what so I've like watched obviously a couple videos
Yeah.
just trying to like get up to speed with some of the stuff that you're looking at, but he was saying that he was like the business was fine. He was like we were making money, we were profitable, and then he said that they tried to oust me in X, Y, and Z ways. Even Robert Greene, somebody who said that he was very, very accomplished, but his ambitions started to
Cloud his judgment.
and they started to get too big for what was actually feasible and what was actually realistic. And that's part of the reason why Robert Greene alluded to why the board ended up.
And Robert Greene was on the board.
Yeah,
I
he
think
was on the board.
Yeah, he had such Dov had such a pull for Robert Greene because of the 48 Laws of Power book that he was like, I need you on my board. Like that's how much he respected him, and so definitely a connection there for sure.
And he said that they were also they were close. That and I looked at some old clip from like 13 14 years ago where they're saying that they had this almost mentor mentee relationship, big brother younger brother type relationship. But the reason where I heard a lot of this he like these outsized ambitions talk was in Robert Greene's interviews where he was talking about when people would ask him to comment on Musk. And the story that he would always go back to is Dov Charney at American Apparel and how he used to be, or he did a lot of great things, essentially creating an apparel company in America that is not using cheap labor in third world countries and taking advantage of that, but paying people livable wages in America was a great feat. But he wanted more. That's something that people kept talking about. Is like he wanted to push. He always thought that there was more, and that's where Robert Greene used Dov Charney as a cautionary tale for somebody like Elon Musk.
Yeah, I think that's smart, right? And that's kind of what I was looking at it as is, wow, like there's a lot of value in these 48 Laws of Power. There's also a lot of value in looking at Dov's journey as a whole. And so part of me was like, wow, like there's some good things, but majority of these things are things I should stay away from if I'm, gonna want to be a successful leader. So that was just, one of the topics I saw this week that I was like, wow, we can definitely talk about that on Founders Drive.
Well, I think it's smart too, just using people as cautionary tales.
Yes.
I've been going into diving deep into Naval Ravikant.
The AngelList, right?
Yes, the founder of AngelList. AngelList is was a forum or like a board for founders and angel investors, and I think incubators and accelerators too, to basically connect. And that was started in 2010 to 2012, and that's essentially Naval Ravikant's claim to fame. Right now, he's an investor, operator. He starts his companies, but he also invested in hundreds of companies at this point. Early investor in Uber, early investor in a lot of well-known Silicon Valley companies, and just a very clear thinker. He's the investor philosopher.
That's where I've heard is like he's much more of a philosopher now.
Well, and he talks about that. He was like, when I first came on the scene, he said people, or he was like, I was only known as a startup person, as a company person.
Right.
And then eventually I put myself out there and started talking about some of my philosophical perspectives and ideas, and that ended up basically blowing up his persona online.
Yeah.
And some very famous interviews are ones where he's on Tim Ferriss's podcast.
That's a good one.
One where he's on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Another great one.
And he puts out some of these ideas, these nuggets of wisdom that have resonated and have caught the attention of a lot of people, not even just startup founders or tech people, but just in general, because and I think the big part of it is he just really speaks to the fundamentals of the human experience in a very lucid way one thing that he really focuses on, or I should say three things, are health, wealth, and happiness. And he focuses on in the order of getting people wealthy first, because that's what people want, and then healthy, and then happy. Although he does state that the importance of them are in the reverse order, where happiness is ultimately the goal that we should be seeking, health, and then wealth is actually the least important of the three.
Of course.
But I love the way he thinks, and even going through and reading the almanac of Naval Ravikant, and it was put together by a guy named, I think, Eric Jorgensen, who compiled a list of his tweets. Naval's really famous for going on these long tweet storms where he shoots out these chained ideas. It was before you could do a tweet thread.
It was the literal stream of consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's the one who originated that, but he would go on those tweet threads.
He mastered it.
And he would do them in a way where each individual one could be read individually, but they also made context in the longer stream of thoughts. And so they were very atomic in their structure. But yeah, he's just a fascinating mind, a very clear thinker, and is able to break down concepts that a child can understand.
Is there any small tidbit that you've learned from Naval that stuck out to you?
There's a lot. There's a ton.
I think that is interesting too, how there could be so much. It's hard to pick a few good ones, but
yeah, I think one thing is, and we can kind of break these down, but one thing is play long-term games with long-term minded people.
Yes,
that's something that I really enjoy. He says don't play status games. Get rich on purpose is another one, and we can go into any of these that resonate with you. There's the idea of leverage that he talks about a lot, and it goes back to Archimedes' principle, where you give me a lever long enough and then I'll move the world. That's a really powerful concept. He talks about compound interest. That's another really powerful concept, that
everything comes from compound interest.
He talks about how in the financial space, it's really the compound interest applied to finance is just scratching the surface. It applies to everything, and it's a fundamental. But I think probably one of the most powerful concepts that I've taken from him is productize yourself. And when I go back and I read a lot of what he's put in that book, I realize how much of that is embodied in the company that we're making, in the sense that that's the direction things are going. Being able to sell and build, those are two things that he talks about are really powerful skills. And those are things that we're seeing right now, is building in the age of AI it's way more accessible, and selling is the social aspect of it. Everybody's talking about AI and social. And so the idea of productizing yourself, producing the best version of yourself, is a way that I internalize that. Is a really powerful concept that resonates with me and underlies the whole bits of wisdom, all the bits of wisdom that he's thrown out there.
And it's not just building something like coding it or, infrastructure. It's also like building your brand. Like that's also a part of it that you need to be able to build. And then obviously, like you mentioned, selling either digital product, time with yourself, or your expertise, really. And that's why we're building Constance. Is for people, anybody, to be able to exercise what he's talking about. So I see a lot of that in what we're doing. Naval is a very interesting character. Like he's almost like this like Buddha figure now. You know what I mean? Like very like
he's
heavy.
He's a tech Buddha.
Tech Buddha. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. Very much into the philosophy. Very much into how people operate. Which I think is also like a good pairing with like the 48 Laws of Power. I'm sure he's...
We'll go into that though, explaining the 48 Laws of Power with the bridge between what he does.
Well, I think Naval does it in a way that he talks about these things, but doesn't label them in a way that make you think that you can weaponize it. I think Naval is saying a lot of the same things, but when you read his stuff, you almost feel like you're more enlightened versus where I feel like when I read the 48 Laws of Power, it almost feels like I'm being armed with a weapon.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. I've never heard it phrased that way, but it does make sense.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, there's an inherent negative bias when I'm reading the Laws of Power, because it's like more to me when I read it personally about manipulation and stuff like that, whereas Naval's, it's more like understanding and enlightenment, even though I feel like they have a lot of the same like through lines.
You know, that's very interesting. So when you say manipulation, I think that's one thing to zoom in on really quickly.
Sure.
Before we go back to this connection. To me, manipulation is the negative side of the spectrum of influence.
Yes.
In the sense that influence is when it seems like when we're using the information we have or the skills that we have to influence somebody for the betterment of them and us, right? Yep. And then manipulation is more dark. And this is more, I'm speaking more in connotations right now.
Sure.
Because I've heard people say, hey, manipulation isn't inherently bad. And I don't think it is inherently bad, but the way that society perceives it now, it's more using things to steer people in a way that they otherwise wouldn't go for negative reasons.
Yeah. Or
reasons that don't take into account that person's betterness, or like their it doesn't take into account that person and what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But in the influence space, I mean, everybody wants to be an influencer these days. I think it's like 50 or like 60% of Gen Zers they want to be an influencer when they want to grow up.
I think they want to be influential.
Yeah.
But more and more people that I talk to don't want to be an influencer.
Right, because they don't want to do their perception of the content creator or whatever. They're not really interested in.
A TikTok dancer.
Yeah.
It's like,
but people do want to be influential.
Yes.
In the sense that they want to be able to speak their mind and have that resonate in a way that aligns with their goals and their interests.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of manipulation and influence, it's one of those taboo topics, and I think that with the 48 Laws of Power, the reason why that became so influential is because it talked about things that people never really wanted to talk about or say out loud. It was the things that people would observe, but would never broadcast.
And you would feel it, and you might not have a good way to say it or to put it into words, but I can guarantee you everyone has felt that at one point or another in their life, on the receiving end of some of those tactics.
Yeah, where you're like, wait, what just happened here? Did I get played?
Yes.
But there's also times where you're like, man, I'm glad I had that person there, because if they weren't here to steer me or influence me in certain ways, then I might have been doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yes.
So that's intriguing. But the through line between Naval's writings and Robert Greene's writings for me is that they're very clear, both of them. And I feel like both are actionable.
Interesting. To me, I'm not sure if they're 100% actionable, because I guess they are given a scenario. You almost have to like give yourself the scenario to then apply these things to, which isn't a bad thing. But these observations work within a dynamic. Okay. All of these observations work within a dynamic. And so you have to be able to selectively choose what laws or which philosophical stances apply to your dynamic, because they don't all apply all the time.
Okay.
I think there are certain things where if you try to apply a different law at the wrong time, it's going to pull back in your face.
They're very context dependent.
Exactly.
There's always nuance there.
Yeah. But there is, like, I think you said it best, like, there is a through line there where they're very clear. Both of them are very clear in terms of what they're trying to say, and you can take things away from when you read a passage or we have a conversation about it. You can take things away from that and be like, yep, I learned something there.
Yeah. So Naval is a curious person. I haven't really got that deep into the happiness section in this book, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. It's split into two sections: build wealth, build happiness, I believe, are the two sections. And then he talks a lot about in the wealth section. That's the main place where I've like really read, and then other places more skimmed through, read a couple passages here and there.
It's funny how that plays into life, right? Building wealth first and then trying to find out. But yeah.
Well, the one thing he talks about with happiness is a choice. And it's something
I believe that as well. I haven't read the book even, but I believe that.
And he talks about building happiness, or building habits of happiness. And again, it's one of those things where people just tell you to be happy, but they don't lay out their philosophy or how they arrived at being happy. And I think that, or they'll tell you not to go after wealth, but only go after happiness. And they work together.
They absolutely work together.
And so, like, again, using this Robert and Naval parallel, they both speak to those things that other people dismiss, whether it's a taboo subject or I don't want to get into this weeds of this abstract subject.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful and clarifying. But on the wealth side, one distinction that he makes is how wealth is not money.
Okay, go on to that.
Wealth is ownership and assets that can earn you money in your sleep. And not wealth. Money is the transfer of the, let's say, the energy accumulated from those assets.
That's interesting. I know he's really big on like not selling your time for money.
Yeah, he says you can't get rich selling your time because it's linear.
Yes.
And yeah, because it's linear. Whereas assets become exponential because you can create multiple assets and then they're all working in parallel, earning at the same linear rate, which is literally the definition of an exponential growth in terms of revenue.
That's wealth. That's not just wealth, that's generational wealth right there, if you can do that with enough assets.
Well, and when you think about like technology in the space that we're in, is the main benefit of it and why we're all chasing that hockey stick curve, the exponential curve, is that the marginal cost of replication is cheap.
Goes to zero eventually. Right? Once it's built, you can control V, control C, control V, you know?
Exactly.
Like copy paste that stuff as much as you want and it's gonna work, especially when you have a company that can, I guess, have as many customers as there are people in the world. There's like unlimited amounts of people that can take advantage of your products, and then by proxy, then you can make money off those people taking advantage of your products.
Yeah, in the digital space. And he talks about how the right line of code, it will take a step back, is leverage is a concept that he keeps going back to. And we talked about it earlier in this episode, but he talks about how when you leverage, for instance, the right piece of code, how powerful that can be. When you think about it, is this person just wrote this line of code and sequence these lines of code and created an algorithm of instructions, and when you apply that in the context of building assets that can scale, it becomes extremely powerful. But that also goes into the idea of, now that digital products are much more accessible, it might not be code, that's just one form of digital product, but now that digital products are more accessible, we can all take advantage of these concepts of leverage in building an asset that can earn for you.
Yeah, one of the things just that sparked an idea in my head as you were talking about that exact quote was another quote I believe he had, where it's like, we have to forget about the term like 100x developers. There are 10,000x developers out there.
Yeah.
There are literal 10,000x developers out there that we just don't want to acknowledge because there's ego there. There's, a lot of things getting in the way of us saying like, no, there are people that are literally 10,000x. But the reason he's saying that is because you could have one person working on the right thing, and you could have 10 people working on the wrong thing. That one person is going to have all that leverage. It's going to actually make the most progress because they're working on the right thing, versus those 10 people are just going to be wasting their time.
That's something that often gets missed in a lot of engineering and coding interviews is, how do you know you're working on the right thing?
So many positions rely on the organization to tell you what to work on, and don't even give you the autonomy to choose what you work on or to ask questions about what you work. to figure out if it is the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's one reason why, like, me, you, and like a lot of the developers that were part of our team at Rocket
Yeah.
understood is it's not just about being the most technically competent, but it's also a huge part of it is working on the right thing.
100%.
If you have the fastest car, but you're driving in the wrong direction, it's like you're gonna lose a lot of races.
Exactly. Exactly. And so that's huge.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. And I guess I never really attributed as much to the ego aspect of it, like you succinctly put it, but that's a real part of it. Is you can get in your own way.
Yes.
By literally just working in the wrong space, in the wrong direction, or not knowing how to leverage what you know.
And some of the smartest people I know are able to make a lot of movement without moving anywhere.
That's a bar.
They make a lot of waves and nothing's happening, you know?
Yeah, it's so subtle. It's elegant. It's efficient.
They're staying busy,
yeah,
but they're not growing. They're not expanding. They're not moving in the right direction. And so that's something you got to be careful for, you know, especially if you're a founder or if you're a leader at any of these companies. You have to make sure that you know what you're working on and why.
Yeah, he talks about getting rich on purpose. And he broke it down into 4 levels.
Okay.
The first level is you're just hoping. You're hoping that you just get rich, and that's not really what you want to do.
I bought a couple lotto tickets my time.
The next step is getting rich through hustle, where you're working hard, you're running all around, and you're hustling, trying to get an opportunity and create and make things happen.
Okay.
The next level is when you're using your mind, your field of attention, to become intelligent about how you pick opportunities for wealth. It's where you use your intelligence. You see things before other people don't see them, and you've gathered enough data to feel confident in that decision, even though it's not something that people completely understand. And then the 4th level is when you've developed and productized yourself to such a point where opportunities start to find you. You've developed this reputation where people are like, hey, invest in my business, do this for me, do that for me. And you don't have to do as much seeking.
You're well known.
Exactly. And so all of those you have they overlap. So it's not one or the other, but being mindful of how you're approaching building wealth is the way that I took from it is very, very important, because if you do it one way, you can spend a lot of energy aimlessly. If you do it another way, then it can be very, very easy. It can be simple.
Because you're working on the right thing.
Yeah. And I hesitate to say easy, because he even talks about it. He's like, it's hard. Your life's work is going to be hard. And it should be hard, because that's where you get meaning from it.
Yeah.
But there are different ways to go about it. One thing he talks a lot about too, which I think there's an underlying principle in what we talk about, is doing things that you're passionate about and play. He talks a lot about play. He was like, what I do to other people looks like a headache. He's like, but I'm having a good time.
Right.
And that's how I know that if I'm ever competing against somebody, I'm going to destroy them, because it's fun for me. If you're agonizing over these things that I get joy out of, you're going to have a really hard time.
It's a really fundamental thing that you probably see in a really, benign use cases every day. The person that is playing basketball for 20 hours a day is going to get better, and who enjoys it is going to get better than the person who's like, oh, this is a chore. I have to go out to the basketball court. I have to shoot around.
My God, I don't want to do that.
It's you're just gonna walk around them in circles.
Yeah.
Because you are seeing it as a game.
Yeah.
And they're seeing it as a job.
Another thing with play is when you play, some people look at play as just laughing and going up and down the slides at a park. And so when we get older, we're like, I graduated from that. I can't play anymore. I'm serious now.
Yeah.
But when you listen to people like Jordan Peterson or Andrew Huberman talk about play, it's much more experimental. You're trying things out. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work and get me results while having fun, because that's something that I want to continue to do.
Right.
Is this something where I'm enjoying what I'm doing? Like, that's powerful. And even bringing it all the way back to our boy Dov Charney, is, were you inviting these people into a game, or were you forcing these people to do what you wanted to do to accomplish your ambitions?
Right.
Because that's not sustainable. You can hit the top of a mountain and get booted, and that might be all you want, but there are people that have figured out how to sustain their success, and personally, that's what I'm after.
Yeah. Yeah, this was fantastic.
Yeah, rich on purpose.
Rich on purpose.
Yeah. Do you want to get into
I think we should. This is fantastic.
Yeah,
I think we had a great conversation about all those things, from the 48 Laws of Power to Naval, and how you might be able to use this in your life.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'll catch you on the Super Secret Founders Drive.
Like, subscribe. Peace.
Peace.